Welcome to the Grief Bully Podcast. I am your host, J.Nicole. Thank you for joining our weekly discussion around grief, mental health, and your overall personal wellness. The Grief Bully Podcast will serve as a vehicle to help you navigate life's journey. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the podcast with anyone in your life that you think it will help. Let's bully grief together. What's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode of the Grief Bully Podcast. I am your host, J.Nicole. Today is Monday, July the 19th. We are back in the studio, rocking and rolling. Guys, we are episode 101. I am feeling great, feeling amazing, and I'm feeling really hungover. And I am hungover from last week's episode. If you haven't already, you definitely want to go check it out. Actually, you probably want to pause on this one and go check that episode out first before you listen to this. Just giving you the heads up. Today, I got a guest co-host here with me that's usually on the show. If you've been watching and you're familiar, if not, let me introduce to you Adena Jay. What's up?
Hello, how are you?
I am doing well. So Adena Jay is our guest co-host. She pops in from time to time, checking on us. Yeah, making sure the show's going well and that we're bringing you guys deep, dope, phenomenal content. I didn't even mean for that to go deep, dope, but whatever. It happens. So like I said, we're going to just get right into it. We're going to recap last week's episode. We had a phenomenal guest when we were in here celebrating episode 100 in a row. I felt great about it, but I felt like we couldn't just move past. So we couldn't just drop that episode and then not touch on it anymore and just move forward. So because Adena was actually in the studio when we were recording the episode, I know that you had a firsthand take on it, a firsthand perspective, and so you're able to offer some feedback and insight. So last week we had on our show Aziza Kibibi. She is a survivor. She's an activist. She has a nonprofit organization, and she's an author. We'll touch on that a little bit more in this episode. But beyond all of that, to me, I think that she might not be aware of how amazing of a person, the feedback that we received, that she's a beautiful soul. She's a prime example that God exists. This is just to name a few of the text messages or the comments on social media that I have received in regards to her and her existence. So, trigger warning. Let's drop the trigger warning, right? So, this episode was talking about being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse as well as domestic violence. So just want to give you that heads up. Proceed with caution when you check out that previous episode and when you tune in today. So I invited Aziza to come on to the show. She was very willing to come on and just share her story and her experience. And her book actually is titled Unashamed. And I really got
perfect title.
It's perfect title, right? Because the way that she spoke about her story was so unashamedly that I was like blown away. For me, being a grief bully and having guests on my show, I've never touched on this topic. So I do want to, as we're recapping, I do want to discuss how that was for me, being a host. And so I look at my show as an extension of myself. And so my hospitality, in terms of how I would treat you in my home, my physical home, is the same way that I feel having you come onto my show and sit right beside me and have these conversations. So I was a little apprehensive. I didn't want to be offensive. I didn't want to say anything that could not only offend my guest and her story, but also other survivors, and or I don't even know if it's politically correct to call them victims. Do you know what's the right way?
I don't know. I think it'll just vary depending on, from person to person, how they identify themselves in relation to their trauma or their grief or, whatever the situation is. So I think just like with anything, you just ask, and you gain knowledge and so that you can correctly address the person, how they want to be addressed.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense. So right now, since we don't have anyone on the show to correct us, we'll just go with survivor because that's what a word that we heard used, and I know that Aziza identifies as such. So again, wanting to be cautious, but also wanting to have a genuine conversation. And I think it's kind of hard to do that if you have too much reluctancy, then it prohibits you from getting down to the conversation and making sure that the person feels comfortable with that. So from that perspective, what do you think?
I mean, I think that is normal, and I feel like it would be weird if you didn't have that reluctancy, because you are human and you have never experienced anything at least from my knowledge, anything in relation to what Aziza has been through, or her experiences. So I think that is respectful.
Well, I meant, what did you think? I told the guests that you were actually in the studio while everything was going. So I meant your feedback as far as like how it actually went, the conversation.
Well, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, no, I think the conversation went really well. I do think that and I mentioned this to you before, that usually, or in the past, you've had guests who were maybe not on like the same level of healing, maybe I could say. And that's no disrespect to anyone in, their grief journey or their trauma journey. But I feel like Aziza just brought a different light, even just from being in the room with her. She's just so like airy and light. There's just something about her that, to me, is whimsical, I guess you can say.
Whimsical. Wow. Whimsical. I don't know the last time I heard that word.
Oh,
what year is this? I mean, I don't even know. Have I even heard that in conversation?
Well, I'm old. So. No, but I don't know. There was just something about her. And I know we talked about this afterwards, and we both, had the same initial assessment of just being in her presence and, in her energy. And it was just, everything about it was just a vibe. It was dope.
I definitely think it's a vibe. And the reason why, too, and this is the thing. So, again, I don't want to give away too much of the story, because I do want you to go back and watch the episode, because it was phenomenal.
Yeah,
that's
very,
just the
very
best
phenomenal.
way to say it. It would exceed your expectation of how you could perceive the conversation would go when someone's coming on your show to talk about their experience, their trauma, their grief when it comes to childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence at the hands, ladies and gentlemen, of her father. So if I have not said that already, I want you to be aware of that's a big part of this, is that the abuse and the violence all came at the hands of her father, her biological father. So there's many depths and layers to that. And so I don't want to hit on it too much. But again, when you hear, oh, that's what we're going to be talking about today, or, oh, that's what the show is about, et cetera, then you could think about it and say, whoa, I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to hear that. That's too much. And listen, I've heard some feedback. It made people really emotional. It made some people emotional, and it not even just from a standpoint of it brought up or triggered anything in their life per se, but it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I've heard the story. I had the conversation with her. I've read some parts of her book, and I've heard all the clips that I put on social media, and it's still, I don't think I've fully accepted it. Not that I have to accept it, right? Like, it's not my life or my experience, but it's still so much to digest and process that it's actually a reality. That's someone's reality.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, because I mean, like, it's different when you read an article, or you might watch like a Lifetime movie. It doesn't like necessarily like bring it so much to life, but when you actually sit in front of someone and you listen to their words and the way that they describe it, it's just like, wow, I cannot even believe that she's literally still like standing right in front of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what I like that you said there is that actually being brought to life. So it brings me to the point where when I talked about to a few people, family, close people, that I wanted to have Aziza on the show, a few folks are like, oh, so you're not talking about grief anymore? And I said, well, see, that also confirms why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, because we as a society and as people, we don't exactly know what grief is. Because again, and I'll say this a million times, by definition, it's deep sorrow.
Right.
And so as Aziza confirmed, and as I would assume, in a story like hers, there's loaded grief. There's depths of it that can't even be articulated. It's what I would definitely argue with anybody. So when you're talking about that and people are like, oh, you're changing up your style. No, but I want to have those conversations, because what you said about bringing it to life, there's some power in actually something being tangible. Like you can reach out and touch something. It doesn't make it as impossible, if that makes sense, or like invincible, like it's this thing that just couldn't happen to me, right? Or that wouldn't happen to someone that looks like me, or someone that I know or that lives next door. Does that make sense? So that's why I think I'm pushing this big time, and you'll notice that on my social media, I rarely push my episodes so much. Right. But for me with this, is like you have to experience this woman's, someone used the word exodus, her basically transition, her ability to go from what I would say are the pits of hell to this point where she can be an advocate and an activist and do all of this amazing work and just, for God's sake, smile.
Right. Even just like you were saying, bringing it to life. I was telling someone about the story that I work with, and she was like, wait, in New Jersey? It just was like, this happened in New Jersey? Like, of all places, New Jersey? And I'm like, yes, this happened in New Jersey. Like, this woman lives in New Jersey. So, like, even just not even to just say, like, oh, this can never happen to me, but, like, this doesn't happen in New Jersey. And it just took me back, because I was just like, yo, that's crazy.
It is really crazy. I think, and we'll get into this. So we can actually, you know what? Let's just roll into it now. So again, if you guys haven't already noticed, definitely want to check out the episode. What would you say was one of your biggest takeaways from her conversation, or just what it might have made you reflect on in your own personal life?
I think the biggest takeaway, of course, was when she talked about how she was able to still believe in God after all of the,
Why do you say "of course" there? I just want to challenge you on that, because you said of course. Why would that be an assumption?
Well, I don't know. I don't know why I said of course, but I guess because we've talked about it and you already know, like, kind of what the episode was already about. So I guess for the listeners, it wasn't an of course moment. But for me, definitely that part where she talked about how she's still able to believe in God, but also you asked one question that still to this day, I think back and I'm like, that was such a great question to ask, because you don't think about that. So you asked her, like basically you said, like, so what was the day to day, like, when things were good? Like, did you guys have, like, family dinners? Did you guys, because of, like, this is her dad. So did life still exist a little bit, quote unquote, normally? And when you said that, my eyes, like, lit up, like, yes, I want to know that question. Like, I didn't know I wanted to know that until you said it. And her answer was that they did do family things, and there was still some normalcy to their routine, and, having dinner together and stuff like that. So it made me realize that, like, even when you are in a really bad place, like, you still can find even just a little bit of, like, hope or, like, light to, make it a little bit better, even if it's just for that moment. You know what I mean?
I definitely understand. I think that's why I understand people's apprehension to watch the episode because of the content, but I got to tell you, there are moments where it is heavy and it is some graphic things, but not really.
Yeah, not
like,
the whole thing.
It wasn't like, we're not speaking of specific acts or things along those lines. It was very general around the actual acts of the abuse. It was more so how she was able to come out of that, and then some of the heartache along the way, aside from the actual act. But what was the grief really? Because that's what it's about. We've got to understand what people are going through and the levels of trauma that we are experiencing.
Right.
As a culture. And if we can't lean into these conversations, and it's not going to be for everybody, but for those people who it will help, I was able to apply a lot of it to my own life. And this is why I'm pushing it to people, because I think one of the biggest areas that we might struggle with, and I have in my life sometimes too, is dealing with forgiveness when you feel like people could have done better.
Right.
There wasn't really much hindering them from such. And so what I'm saying is that these were intentional acts that were done against her. So sometimes people do things and they didn't really mean to offend you, or they didn't really know. So that's what I'm trying to get to, is that sometimes we do things to people.
Right, of course.
Maybe it was a once in the blue. It's out of some anger, you having a bad day. But this was like deliberate, like a lot, like for years, like a long time. And so how do you even come out of that and still have any ounce of empathy yourself or want to give compassion to the world and do that? And so it had me look at my situations, and I don't like to compare, because what's heavy for me might be light for the next person and vice versa. So although we might not have went through some of the depths and the extremities that she did, that doesn't take away from the fact that some things that we may have went through in our lives could have felt similar.
Right.
So there are some things that I've gone through in my life, which really, it's funny because I don't feel like I really went through them, because the biggest traumas for me are things that happened be beyond my existence, or things that happened in the background of my life. Okay, right. So now I'm trying to give you a visual. So there was things that were going on in my life that I had no idea were going on, because they were other people's relationships and other people's situations, not knowing that one day they would impact me.
Right.
And so although it wasn't impacting me while it was going down or what have you, but once I knew, it's now in my lap. So therefore now it's my responsibility to heal. And so it challenged me there, where it's like, wow, I can actually move more freely in my grief and my trauma and my pains and hang-ups, and just say, really? You can do this. So it kind of challenged me in that way. Does that make sense? I kind of went on a tangent, guys. I'm sorry about that. I was trying to like bring all of the thoughts together and articulate it without expressing too much, because in my healing, this is why I believe it's admirable what she did. I'm not at a place where I'm willing to completely share some of the darkest parts of my life and things that I've had to experience and endure just yet. Right. So when I try to tell you guys some of the things, I'm trying to express it outwardly without PS telling you guys my business.
I got you. Yeah. No, I agree. And definitely it kind of makes you sit back and think like, man, like people are really holding some heavy stuff.
Right, exactly. And one thing she said was that we have a choice. And I think choice sounds so freeing, but choice is scary. It can be scary, because it's like, oh yeah, you have a choice and you have a free will, and it's your decision if you do this and if you do that. But if you're going to accept the fact that you have a choice to make, then you then put that in your own face and say, hey, I choose if I'm pissed off or not. I choose if I choose joy or if I choose happiness or if I stay stuck. And people don't feel like that though. I think a lot of people feel like it's someone else's fault. It's someone else's responsibility. Someone else has got to save me and get me out of this. And so, yes, I believe we need other people's help, whether that's family, friends, spiritual counsel, professionals, whatever. But it starts with you. You can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. It's just a reality. And I'm, again, from my personal experience, I just feel like you can preach to me, you can give me as many quotes as you want, you can darn nabbit, you can drive me to a therapist. You yourself can make an appointment to a therapist. If you don't open your mouth and tell what you're dealing with, it doesn't matter. So you choose. So are we choosing to the extent that we need to choose in order to be set free? So are we loving ourselves with condition? Because we talk about unconditional love a lot, and giving unconditional love and receiving unconditional love. But what about internally? Because are you lying to yourself? Or are you staying comfortable in your fear? Are you staying buried in your shame? Because I feel like shame is one of those things that will really zip your mouth shut until the day that you die.
Yep.
And so and I'm not just saying that, because the name of her book is Unashamed, A Life Tainted. But that's the truth. And she said that she shares her story without shame. And I don't know if I could do that. If that was my story.
Yeah, because
I can't even necessarily do that with my own story.
Right. Yeah. Shame is basically like, I am a bad person. Like my makeup. You know what I mean? Like, so when someone is shameful, that holds a lot of like weight, you know? And for her to say that she is unashamed, like she took that weight off. Like that's not defining who she is.
I love that. And because it also, she talked about too, like that wasn't really her acts.
Yeah.
It wasn't really her acts, but sometimes we can adopt that.
And blame ourselves.
Exactly. Just so you guys know, Adena has her master's in rehabilitation counseling. So when it's some of this jargon and the way that she's saying it and wording, because I want to give you your credit.
She always got to plug that in there.
No, I'm just saying because you know how the certain verbiage and the way that we say it. And so that's why you're also a great asset to the show. Because
thank you.
I'm out here just running on my life experience and whatever. And it's my podcast. So this is my time to really talk and get things out there. But this episode, I can't say more about it. It's amazing. And actually, Aziza and I are going to be going live on Instagram. So I don't know when you'll hear this. Hopefully it's not too late, but we'll be going on Wednesday. I guess it's the 21st of July where we'll be getting onto IG Live because there were so many questions. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, when I went home after recording this episode, I couldn't even sleep that night because
I was knocked out.
I was thinking so much about what I wish I asked and what I wish I said because I didn't have a script and I didn't write questions ahead. That's not how I move. But I was like, man, what about this and what about that? So,
but that's the journalist in you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So part of me, I do want to kind of, maybe both of us can share one question we wish that we asked. But at the same time, I don't want to go into too much of what was answered. So I am kind of trying to get you guys to go watch the episode because it was an hour long and I could never really, this regurgitation could never really do justice to the authenticity of that conversation and the power that was shared. It was and someone said it was such a beautiful thing. It was two strong women basically leaning in together to do this thing. And that's really how I felt. I was so empowered by her. It was just whatever. We cannot keep going back and forth about that whole part of it. We'll do that all day long. But I think one of the questions, well, actually, you know what? You're my guest, guest co-host today. So I'll let you say what question that left you like, man, I really wish I knew blank.
I mean, I want to know everything, honestly. I guess the one question I did want to know is, I guess this might tell too much.
No, just go for it. I'd rather you go for it.
All right. Well, I want to know how she escaped. Like what that process was like.
Say it again a little louder.
How she escaped.
Okay.
So what that process entailed, what that was like, what that was not only like as far as like the actual act of escaping, but like what that felt like internally, mentally, emotionally as well. Because I believe by that time she had a few children already. So that I really want to know that.
Yeah, that was actually, and I remember during it when that was brought up, part of me wanted to dig there, but part of me didn't because at that point I was satisfied with knowing that she escaped. Mm-hmm. And so she did say that it took a couple years to get to that point.
Right.
But I agree. I would love to know more about that part of it. I think I have so many questions. But I guess it would more so just be, how is it to find your own identity outside of this story? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So she shares her story and she's an advocate for it and an activist, but how are you not, again, this isn't me saying this, but just a girl whose father did X, Y, and Z. And I know she was saying something that she had a conversation with a friend who was kind of wanting the same things and wanting to know the same things, et cetera, for her. But I just wonder, what does she feel like that? Is she really separate from this story, or is this story a part of who she is? Because a lot of times we honor that, but I don't know if we honor it with certain badges. Does it depend? So, for example, I can say, hey, listen, having my parents divorced and having my parents at one point was on drugs and seeing some domestic violence, that's a part of my story. It's made me who I am. It's a part of it. And sometimes we can say that, but do we say that fully no matter what the background actually is? Mm-hmm. So I kind of would be curious to know about that. I do want to say this about her book, which you can get on Amazon and you can go to azizakibibi.com. But we're probably going to end the episode around this. I'm not even going to go into my normal inspirational boost and all that stuff because this is something that you don't even know. You didn't even hear this yet. So this is on the back of the book here where it says, I wonder if my father still prays. Faint memories of seeing him kneeling on the side of my parents' bed, hands clasped and head lowered, triggered a feeling of being caught spying on him during such a private moment. I used to wonder what he prayed for. Was he asking God for forgiveness or permission to come and take me out of my bed at night?
That gives me goosebumps.
Whew.
That's heavy.
That's that last line.
Yeah.
Was he asking God for forgiveness or permission to come and take me out of my bed at night? I gotta tell you, I didn't get that emotional during our interview, but just now reading that, I'm kind of holding it back a little. That was, I got some chills too, some goosebumps too, because that should just never be. Because I'm not hearing that as Aziza, the adult woman that went through so much work and did so much internal that sat across from me last week. I'm thinking about the young girl. If you see the innocence in this picture, I'll let you see. If you can just see the innocence in this picture, it's a total different experience. So if I had a child on the show, her as a child, and we're interviewing and having this, the impact is totally different. So when I read that really struck so many chords with me. And I just have to say, if you yourself or someone you know is a survivor or is in a situation where it needs to be figured out, I think that it's really important that you know that you have our love and our prayers, and that there is hope, and that there is a possibility that things can get better for you. And I'm not saying it's that easy, and there's definitely resources and people out there.
Yeah, can we link in here like her a nonprofit and other resources for victims of sexual abuse?
Definitely. We definitely will do that. We'll make sure that we have those linked. I think it was in the end of the YouTube video for last week's episode. Oh, okay. But we're definitely going to post it, in the comments in the note section here as well. When you guys go check out the episode, definitely leave comments over there. Follow me on Instagram at I_am_J.Nicole, because we're going to be going live. We're going to be on Instagram Live taking Q&A. Aziza Kibibi and myself. Wednesday, I think that's the 21st. Monday's the 19th or 21st of July. If you listen to this beforehand, definitely want to invite you to join us for that conversation. I'm sure it will be another great one.
I'll be in the comments, so look for me.
For sure. Listen, I thank you for coming on the show for the short recap for me. We coming off at a high of episode 100, getting right into 101, and we're going to keep it rolling. We're going to have a couple of other survivor conversations coming down the road, some more grief stories, most importantly, tons and tons and tons of life impact, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I'm going to continue to do. From my guest co-host and myself, we want to thank you for tuning in with us. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you come back. Stay notified when we're dropping more content. Like I said already, I hang out the most over on Instagram. Make sure you follow me there at I_am_J.Nicole, guys. So next time, you already know.
Love and light. Peace.